Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more of the Great War, and we are on to week 209, Ludendorff's last wing. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love you to join the Discord and follow me over at Twitch, and please do go check out the gaming channel here on YouTube. Man, only 16 weeks left. I believe this ends at week 225. I looked it up quickly before starting to record today, so I think that's the right final week. Oh man. It's not much longer. Not much longer. What? That's Hold on. Math. 8 weeks left? Did I do roughly 8 weeks left, I think, of this series? I'm doing my math right. Man. Oh, it don't feel real. So with all that said, let's just go ahead and dive right in.
He'd been planning for it all spring and summer. His baby, what all of his offensives had been leading up to. But this week, Ludendorff cancels his plans.
Uh-oh. That's not good.
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War. Last week saw the beginning of the Second Battle of the Marne, but the German advance was stalled by the French defense-in-depth system, and the Allied counterattack, spearheaded by Americans and Senegalese and using some 500 tanks, smashed through the German lines at the end of the week. A German attack on the British in Palestine failed, the Army of Islam is stalled by dysentery in the Caucasus, and the former Russian Tsar Nicholas and his family were executed in Ekaterinburg. Here's what followed. The salient on the Western Front that the German advance in late May and early June had created was no longer really holdable by the middle of the week. On the 21st, the Germans abandoned Chateau Thierry. On the 22nd, they were pushed back nearly 10 kilometers, and again on the 23rd, as British tanks advanced up at the Somme. Still, the action by the Marne was mainly a French battle, and French General Philippe Pétain had followed up last week's counterattacks with new attacks on the 20th, the south and east sides of the salient. David Stevens...
Imagine being Philippe Pétain. You are the hero, a hero of World War One. And then you do a silly little thing in the 40s. And now you are not remembered good. You fucking idiot. Like, I don't... Oh, Pétain.
Points out that he committed 50 reserve divisions to this, leaving exactly 0 fresh reserves left. But after the 20th, the Allied advance couldn't help but slow down since, 1, they were beyond their artillery's range, and 2, the wooded countryside they had to cover was dotted with German machine gun nets.
That's a good deterrent.
3, they no longer had the element of surprise, and 4, a lot of their tanks were out of action. In Martin Gilbert, I read something German Chancellor Georg von Hertling wrote about the first few days of the battle. The Germans were still expecting to receive peace proposals within 2 months, with Paris at their mercy. That was on the 15th. On the 18th, even the most optimistic among us knew that all was lost. The history of the world was played out in 3 days. Having said that, when Hertling asked German Quartermaster General Erich Ludendorff if the German army could ever take the offensive again, Ludendorff said, "5 times thus far during the war I had to withdraw my troops, and was still able at the end to beat the enemy. Why shouldn't I succeed a 6th time?" But let's look...
I mean, he does have a point, though now there are hundreds of thousands of Americans arriving, fresh troops, to a war that has been stagnant-ish for 4 years. Ludendorff, I don't think there's going to be a 6th time, my friend.
Look at the
not friend. No.
New situation after the attacks and counterattacks of last week. In mid-March, when the German offensives were just about to begin, they had 300,000 more troops on the Western Front than the Allies did. But between then and now, 1 million German soldiers had been killed, wounded, or captured.
1 million? 1 million in the last 3 months? 4? Jesus Christ.
And a lot of these were the stormtroops who were not easily replaced. The French and the British had also lost 1 million men together, and though the French would have problems replacing theirs, the Americans were now pouring in at like 250,000 per month, and now they were fighting too.
USA.
So by this time, it was the Allies that had a few 100,000 more troops there than the Germans, and that gap was widening every day. This week, on the 24th, Allied leaders Ferdinand Foch, Sir Douglas Haig, Pétain, and John Pershing met and agreed that they would soon launch a series of coordinated offensives. Haig's guys would attack eastward from Amiens, Pétain's north from the River Marne, and Pershing's south of Verdun. All of the main objectives were railway lines. On the 25th, the Germans made another desperate attempt to surround Rheims. This was a complete failure, since the German armies just didn't have the bite anymore, though their retreat was an orderly one, even with Allied counterattacks. Remember our episodes from September and October 1914?
No. If you had said 1917, I would have said maybe. Like Elijah Wood in that one fake interview. Will you have fix? Maybe. Anyway, no, not I don't remember anything from 1914.
Doesn't it sound like that all over again? The Germans reach the Marne. The Germans cross the Marne. They cannot maintain the pressure and get pushed back, and then they regroup along the Aisne. Thing is, the German army now faced a stronger enemy, and a lot more of them, and we've talked to the point of boredom about the German lack of resources or replacement troops. It was a grim situation. But everything wasn't exactly rosy for the Allies. G.J. Meyer points out in A World Undone that the end of the German threat to Paris meant the end of any chance for the Clemenceau government to fall, which meant the end of any chance for a French government that would seek peace instead of prolonging the war for who knew how long. The French now had combat units that were entirely made up of men over 40. The British were drafting men of 50 into their army. And look at the map. Germany not only had basically all of Eastern Europe, they had more of the Western Front than they had just a few months ago. But Germany had fresh problems. On the 20th, the Flanders offensive that Quartermaster General Erich Ludendorff had been waiting to launch all summer, Operation Hagen, hit some hitches. That day, German command received recommendations to postpone it for a few days in light of the ongoing German failures in France. Now, the Battle of Soissons, the Allied counterattack that began at the end of last week, ended after just 4 days, but it had cost the Germans 168,000 casualties to just over 100,000 for the Allies. German general and strategic planner Fritz von Lossberg recommended now executing Hagen with whatever was available, but as a limited tactical attack and not a big operational one. He also recommended that after that, putting the whole front on the defensive, with lines further back behind areas that could be flooded. Ludendorff, though, could not bring himself to give up all the ground gained over the spring and go back into an attritional war of defense. Still, after the next couple of days, forced by circumstances in France, Hagen was called off indefinitely. The Great Flanders Offensive, that was supposed to be the point of everything the Germans had done, was overdue and unlikely to ever take place. Ludendorff himself was in obvious torment. To all the weight of his military problems was added the fear of what would happen when the German public, still assured daily that his armies were victorious in the field, awoke to the magnitude of his failure.
Yep.
So in a general view, all of that force, all of that fighting, all that the Germans had done in even getting to the Marne was for nothing. But you know who done a whole lot more traveling? The Czechoslovak Legion. On the 24th, the legionnaires reached the Volga River and now held a nearly 5,000-kilometer line from the Volga to the Pacific. The next day, they reached Ekaterinburg, where the Tsar and his family were recently murdered. At the end of the week, in the north, French troops added their numbers to the British at Murmansk. So if you look at the big picture, including the Germans holding the formerly Russian shores of the Black Sea, the Bolsheviks were now struggling to hold power in just the center. And here are a couple of notes to end the week. On the 22nd, Ernst Seidler von Feuchtenegg resigns as Austrian minister-president, succeeded by Dr. Maximilian Husarek von Heinlein. On the 25th, British aircraft dropped 300 tons of bombs behind the German lines near Amiens. But the following day, The top-scoring British flying ace of the war, with 72 kills, though only 61 officially, Edward McManus, met his fate. He shot down his 73rd plane, but after that, disregarded his own rule and flew low over the wreckage and into a storm of German small arms fire. As he and his New Zealander wingman flew away, the wingman saw a blue flame spout from Manek's engine cowling. Then the left wing of Manek's plane broke off and he plunged to his death. Interestingly enough, it was really unlikely that Manek should have ever been in the skies in the first place. When the war broke out, he had been in Turkey laying telephone cables, and being British, he was imprisoned. After a failed escape attempt, he was put in solitary and then contracted dysentery. The American consulate got his release, but when he tried to enlist back in Britain, he was at first classified as unfit for military duty. It would not be until late 1916 that he qualified as a pilot. And the week comes to an end, with the Allies still gaining ground in the West and making plans for new offensives, even as the Germans are forced to cancel theirs, and the Bolsheviks, who are not even fighting this war, find themselves surrounded by its participants. It's been exactly 4 months since Operation Michael began the German spring offensives, and the Germans have lost 1 million men. And the Allies have lost 1 million men. 2 million men in 4 months. 1/3 of 1 year. And you think, that cannot be sustainable. I mean, how long can that go on? And then you realize that next week, it'll be 4 years it's been going on. And that's just par for the course. And there's still no end in sight. If you want to learn more about the German spring offensives of 1918 and how it all...
And that was Ludendorff's last swing. The Great War, week 209. This was another one of those weeks where we are being given a lot of stuff kind of technically happening, but none of it really anything that we haven't already talked about in previous weeks. Nothing like substantial enough to really say more than just, yeah, that's what's happening. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.